Picture a space station right now. Go ahead. Nice. Now, picture it smaller. Smaller. Like, put it on the head of a pin. Now, way smaller. Perfect. That's a pretty great representation of a cell. Cells are sort of like space stations in that they have many parts with different functions, all vital to the unit as a whole. Like, think of a space station without the support beams or the control panel. Pretty useless, right? In this video, we're going to cover some of the structures of the eukaryotic animal cell, specifically cytosol, the nucleus, ribosomes, and mitochondria. With that, let's take a look inside. Ugh. No one warned me it would be so sticky. Is this a modern technological marvel or a frat house? It seems like that's just some good old sticky cytosol, the fluid that suspends the cellular components in cells. Cytosol also allows molecules to diffuse throughout a cell and reach organelles. You may also hear the term cytoplasm in reference to the fluid in a cell. Cytoplasm is used to describe the cytosol with all the other structures and organelles in it. Both terms characterize the fluid goo inside the cell, symbolized here with the cytosol spray leaking onto the jelly floor. While all the cell structures are essential in their own right, the nucleus is kind of the cell's claim to fame, which is why it's represented by the spaceship's command center. First, we're going to take a look at the outside of the nucleus to see what's holding this superstar together. The nucleus is a membrane-bound organelle, and in fact, a double membrane-bound organelle. This membrane is called the nuclear envelope, and it separates all the stuff inside the nucleus from the cytoplasm. You can remember nuclear envelopes by this envelope. He has a pen pal in space prison. It's best not to ask questions. And did you notice I said double membrane? That's 2 phospholipid bilayers. This thing is quadruple paned to show the 2 bilayers of the nuclear envelope. The nuclear envelope is a part of the endomembrane system. The endomembrane system, or EMS, is the group of organelles involved in modifying, packaging, and transporting lipids and proteins. To represent this, there's an EMS Enterprise logo on the command center glass. Be sure to look out for more EMS logos as we explore the rest of the spaceship. The nuclear envelope also has another special feature: passageways. These holes in the command center glass represent nuclear pores, protein complexes that perforate both the inner and outer membranes to regulate the entry and exit of macromolecules, like RNA, hence the orange wires, and proteins. What's that kid doing with that chicken leg? Now, let's check out what's going on inside the nucleus that makes it so important. Well, the nucleus houses most of the genetic material in eukaryotic cells. This genetic material is stored in the form of DNA, represented by the double-stranded helical blue wires in this box. While you're probably used to seeing DNA drawn all by itself in that classic double helix shape we all know and love, when stored in the nucleus, it's typically wound around proteins called histones. To depict this, let's head over to communications. Wow. Look at that guy's meaty arm. He does not miss arm day. Note the blue cables wrapped around his toned arms. That's there to represent DNA wrapped around his tone proteins. The tightly packed DNA and histones that are stored in the nucleus are called chromosomes. See how these tightly packed newspapers kinda look like a duplicated chromosome? Note that when a cell is not replicating, chromosomes are linear rather than X-shaped. The nucleus is also where DNA replication takes place. That's why this guy is adding helical blue wires here, and they look like exact copies of the ones already in this command center. Next, we're going to take a peek at the nucleolus, where ribosomal RNA, which you may also know as rRNA, is synthesized. Well, Alice here, Nuclealis, is assembling a riboprinter inside of the command center to remind you that ribosomes are assembled in the nucleolus, which is a structure within the nucleus. So, what's this ribosomal RNA stuff good for? Well, hold on to your socks. It's combined with proteins to build ribosomes. If you're not familiar with ribosomes, these tiny non-membrane bound organelles are super important. They join amino acids together to form polypeptide chains, so in short, they serve as the site of protein synthesis. Just think of this riboprinter here creating some space meat, which is definitely made of protein. So this drumstick here represents the protein products that ribosomes synthesize. Ribosomes can be found in various locations throughout the cell, and the location of a ribosome determines what type of protein it produces and, eventually, where that protein is ultimately used. Ribosomes that are out in the cytosol make proteins that stay in the cytosol. On the other hand, ribosomes that are attached to membranous organelles usually synthesize proteins that either end up in membranes, in organelles, or being exported from the cell entirely. Okay, these riboprinters are pretty mighty, but now it's time to move into a real powerhouse. Oh yeah, we're talking mitochondria. Mitochondria are membrane-bound organelles. The structure of a mitochondrion consists of an inner and outer membrane. That's two bilayers. Two bilayers. So, once again, we've got 4 panes of glass. Mitochondria serve as the site of 2 very important pathways involved in cellular respiration: the citric acid cycle and oxidative phosphorylation. These processes ultimately result in the production of energy for the cell, like how this power generator provides energy for the space station. Processes in the mitochondria convert energy from food into higher energy ATP. This space station worker is eating and assembling an ATP battery pack to remind you that mitochondria generate ATP from energy stored in macromolecules. While the outer membrane is nice and smooth, the inner mitochondrial membrane is all foldy, forming what's called cristae, represented by the wavy glass inside the power generator. Ooh, cristae in the cristae. Someone must have planned that. This folded inner membrane is where all the proteins responsible for producing ATP are located. Mitochondria have mini cristae to increase the surface where ATP production can occur. Additionally, the inner mitochondrial membrane encloses a gel-like substance called the mitochondrial matrix. The matrix contains enzymes, ribosomes, hence another riboprinter, and DNA. Wait, more DNA? What's that stuff doing outside the nucleus? Turns out the mitochondrion has its very own circular DNA, hence the circular blue double helix wire. And fun fact, you can start calling it mitochondrial DNA because most multicellular eukaryotes inherit all of their mitochondrial DNA from their biological mother. This pattern of inheritance is an example of extranuclear inheritance because it involves transmitting genetic material outside of the nucleus. But what's the deal with this round extranuclear DNA? Why doesn't it look like a normal chromosome? And why is it too cool to hang out with the rest of the DNA in the nucleus? Well, the answer lies in the endosymbiont theory. Most scientists believe that mitochondrial DNA is so different from nuclear DNA because way back in the day, mitochondria were free-living prokaryotic organisms with their own circular genomes. At some point, another cell absorbed one of these prokaryotes, and the 2 organisms started a happy life together as one single cell. It seems like this was a good arrangement because all these millennia later, mitochondria are still kicking around to power our cells and holding on to these funky little rings of DNA. Notice that cristae is an alien? That's to remind us that mitochondria are kinda like aliens taking up residence in eukaryotic cells. Okay, let's just cut it here for part 1. That's a whole lot of spaceship to take in, but first, a quick recap. Cytosol is the fluid that suspends organelles and allows molecules to diffuse throughout cells. The nucleus is the largest organelle. It's enclosed by the nuclear envelope, a double membrane. Nuclear pores in the nuclear envelope regulate the entry and exit of macromolecules in the nucleus. Now, inside the nucleus, we'll find most of a cell's DNA. This DNA is typically wound around histone proteins and tightly packed into chromosomes. The nucleus is also where DNA replication occurs during cell division. The nucleolus is where ribosomal RNA is synthesized. Ribosomal RNA is used to build ribosomes, which synthesize proteins. Next, we have the mitochondria, another organelle with a double membrane. The mitochondria is the cell's power generator. The citric acid cycle and oxidative phosphorylation happen in the mitochondria, which is to say that lots of ATP is synthesized in there. The folds of the inner mitochondrial membrane are called cristae, and this is where the proteins that synthesize ATP are located. Finally, the gel-like substance that fills the inner mitochondrial membrane is called the mitochondrial matrix. The mitochondrial matrix contains ribosomes and mitochondrial DNA. Most eukaryotes inherit all of their mitochondrial DNA from their biological mother. The endosymbiont theory proposes that mitochondria have their own DNA because they were once free-living prokaryotic organisms that were enveloped by eukaryotic cells. Alrighty, that's it for now, but stay tuned to continue this tour of our intergalactic cell ship.